When we think about garden design, it's usually all about us, right? The owners of the garden. But actually, it's not just us that can benefit from a well-designed garden. I'm going to show you in this video how, with a few subtle changes, not only can you have a stylish and great looking garden, but also a garden that's going to benefit wildlife and nature as well.
Birds sing, there's not a cloud in the sky, August 8th is a beautiful day.
Now you might be watching this video thinking, yeah, I want to do everything I can for nature. I want to help the hedgehogs, I want to save the bees. But you also might be thinking, I'm not really sure I want any more wildlife in my garden. Not everyone likes the idea of bugs and spiders and additional nature within their space. After all, it's your sanctuary. You don't want a badger ripping up the lawn. I understand where you're coming from, but please bear with me. There are actually a great number of reasons why you might want to encourage wildlife into your garden and you don't even know it. It can enhance your space not only for you but for your family, and it doesn't have to include that big hairy badger. Here's my top 3 reasons why you should want to encourage wildlife and nature within your garden, no matter how big or small it is. So firstly, a lot of plants and trees need pollinators to help them to reproduce or to create fruit. Without bees or butterflies in your garden, it's going to be a pretty dull space in a short space of time. Second, if you encourage more birds into the garden, these will generally ensure the bug population is kept under control. Hedgehogs will also get rid of slugs, as will frogs and toads, and so by encouraging nature we can actually control some of the bugs and pests we don't like. And finally, a more diverse and balanced ecosystem within your garden will produce more oxygen, cleaner air, water, and generally it's just going to be better for everybody. For me, nature is an absolute must in my garden. There's nothing more I love on a Sunday morning while having my cup of coffee than listening to the birds singing. I love seeing the bees, the butterflies in the garden. It really can nourish the soul. And it's proven that being closer to nature helps our general health and well-being. And what better way to do this and bring this nature closer to your home than through your own garden? So how do we do this? Well, whenever anybody asks me this, I say that there are 3 key elements that you need within your garden to get this right and to make it work.
So the first one we've got is habitat, and then secondly, most definitely food, and of course number 3 is going to be water. If you can get all these 3 in your garden, you'll nail it, but even if you only have 2, this is going to help.
So let's start with habitat. That's the best place to start. It's fairly simple and easy, and the most obvious and simple way to increase habitat within your garden is to plant a tree. Birds love trees, whether it be to nest within or simply to perch on to observe the garden. Now, if you're going to plant a tree within your garden for nature, I'd always suggest one that fruits or at least has berries for the birds. This is a great start, and again, this links into the second point, food, but sticking with habitat, trees are a great option. Now, I know that some people can get a little bit nervous about trees, especially within a small garden. Maybe it's the roots or the how big it's going to grow, but fear not, because as long as you get the right tree, it can be a real asset and certainly not a concern for you. And to get you started, here are my top 3 small trees for nature to plant within your garden.
We've got the Alamolankia lamarcki. Now, snowy white blossom in early spring, followed by berries in midsummer, and then a stunning autumn display. And a maximum height of only 4 metres makes this tree an absolute go-to for many designers, regardless of its benefits to nature. And then we have the rowan tree, or mountain ash, or sorbus, whatever you want to call it. A relatively small tree that produces dense clusters of fluffy white flowers that are followed by berries that are a real favourite for the birds. I particularly like the Joseph Rock variety for its yellow berries and stunning bark. And finally, hazel, or corylus. You can let this one grow into quite a big tree, or like this one in my own garden, you can umbrella prune it to a stunning multi-stem feature which has beautiful catkins, and the squirrels are sure to enjoy the hazelnuts.
But it's not just trees, you know. Hedges are great for nesting, and they provide great corridors for wildlife to move within your garden without fear of perhaps human intervention or a predator that might be possibly within the garden. And there's loads that work well within a well-designed garden. Can be contemporary, could be a little bit more natural. There's plenty of options out there.
And you only have to look to the Chelsea Flower Show, and every year many top garden designers use hedging. I think, when was the last time you saw a fence at Chelsea?
And as you can see, hedges are not just about the boundaries. You can use them potentially to divide a garden, to create interest. Perhaps when you're looking through a garden, if there's a hedge there that creates that little bit of interest as to you can't quite see what's in the rest of the garden, this can be a great option. Here in the UK, a mixed native hedge is always a winner for when it comes to gardens, often consisting of hawthorn, which is a great shrub that works really well when it comes to security. So for boundaries, it's a really good option. Blackthorn, very similar. Also, the sloes make a great sloe gin for Christmas time. And then multiple other types such as cornus, wild cherry. These are all going to give you a great display. Lots of flowers in the springtime, fruit in the autumn. Now we've talked about birds quite a little bit and habitat there, but it's not just the birds we need to consider. Bugs and beetles, these are food for some birds, but also have extra benefits within the garden. If you've got any aspirations of growing fruit trees or vegetables and what have you, these are all going to help. Now, I know some of you might be a little bit concerned about encouraging bugs and beetles within the garden, but fear not, it doesn't have to be the main feature in the garden. You know, it could be just tucked away in the corner or behind a shed. In fact, actually having an area where it's not going to be disturbed by the kids or any other sort of human contact is probably best.
A small log pile or rock pile can be so valuable to the overall diversity of a garden, and it can look good too. Think of a stumpery, a feature I absolutely love and intend to build in my garden eventually. Ivory-like stumps that look almost prehistoric, piled together with ferns and woodland plants. It can look amazing, and it's perfect for a shady spot you don't know what to do with otherwise. Check out this one at Highgrove Gardens. Well, if the King of England can have one, so can you. Now this stump I found when we were landscaping a garden in Italy. It had been dug out when the owner had removed one of the olive trees. Not only did it provide a really interesting feature, but the local lizards loved chasing each other in and out through the cracks and crevices.
Now, one project that I completed very early on when we first moved into the home that we live in now. It was one Easter, and I think I wanted to introduce the kids to nature and to really show them how we could encourage nature within the garden. Some of you might have seen it before, but the idea was to create a bug hotel. This is a great way to get kids involved and to teach them about nature, and it doesn't have to cost very much at all.
So I grabbed a load of pallets, but you could use some old wood if you wanted, and then just a load of old building materials such as bricks, tiles, rocks, and then got some wood which we drilled into. It was great fun, although if I'm honest I carried on way past the point at which they got bored and wandered off.
And if you don't want to go to the efforts of building a bug hotel, maybe you can just set aside a very small area of the garden, again behind the shed or tucked away in a little corner, which you can allow to go a little bit wild. Ivy, one of the best plants when it comes to nature, but equally I don't necessarily want lots of ivy swamp in the garden. But if I can find a little space where I can tuck it away and just leave it to be where it is, and potentially a bit of a log pile or something like that, this is a great opportunity or place for nature to hibernate over the winter and just have a space of its own.
So in a previous video I'd also talked about letting areas of my lawn grow long during the spring and summer, and this in itself is great for nature, although I'm not so sure that when Milo the cat's involved it's so good.
By creating a space for bugs and insects, not only are you going to be encouraging pollinators that are going to really help with the flowers and the display that you're going to get in the summer, but also you're encouraging bugs and insects so that there is more food for the birds, and will encourage more birds within the garden later on. And food is the second element after habitat. Food within the garden for nature is vital. How do we do this? Well, we've already talked a little bit about bugs and insects, but as well as those, we're thinking berries and fruit on the plants and the trees. Pollen-rich flowers are always going to encourage more insects and bugs within the garden, and they often look great too. You know, I'm thinking echinacea, I'm thinking salvias, lavender, foxgloves in a shady spot, hellebores. These are all plants that are going to look great and give you endless possibilities when it comes to your planting plan, but are also going to encourage wildlife within the garden. Sometimes there's a lot of over-cultivated varieties, double flowering roses, for instance, things that are going to have very little pollen. I tend to steer away from them. So when selecting the plants and the flowers to go into your planting plan, it's often just worth thinking a little bit about whether or not these are going to be pollen rich, whether or not the bees are going to be able to get into them. Now, the other thing to do, which naturally as garden designers we're probably going to be doing anyway, is thinking about year-round interest, and in particular winter flowering. We're thinking holly, we're thinking skimmia, we're thinking viburnums, you know, these sort of plants that are going to give you not only an interesting display within your garden over winter, but are going to feed and allow those insects and bugs to thrive, perhaps in the colder times, which is then going to feed the birds. And again, to help you get started, here are my top 3 plants when it comes to winter interest for nature.
So starting off with Mahonia japonica. It's not everyone's favourite, I know, due to its spiky foliage, but its vibrant yellow flowers are stunning, and I actually really like the architectural form of its foliage and when it's pruned correctly. Now there's also soft caress variety if you're really anti-spikes, and this is actually one plant of the year at RHS Chelsea in 2013. Check it out. Sarcococca confusa, or sweet box. This compact evergreen shrub has amazingly scented flowers in wintertime with berries in summer that can often last into winter. The glossy green foliage provides a great foil for summer flowering plants that can be grown as a hedge as well. And then another fragrant winter flowering cracker is Lonicera, or honeysuckle. Perfect for covering an old fence or wall, and it will attract insects with its nectar that birds will love.
So as well as pollinating plants that are going to encourage wildlife, as well as encouraging fruiting plants with berries and nuts and alike to feed over the winter, it's also worth mentioning about bird feeding as well, and this concept of leaving some seeds or some nuts or fruits, fats, whatever it is, out within the garden. I tend to do this in the colder months, particularly just to keep the bird population in good health, or at least do my little bit. And it doesn't have to be obtrusive. It can be high up within a tree. It could be a very simple sort of coconut, as it were, hanging from somewhere that it's not necessarily going to be visible. Again, birds don't necessarily want to be close to us, so hanging it a little bit away from the house means that you're not necessarily going to have to see it, but actually it's going to be doing its job and is going to encourage birds into the garden year round, so that way when spring and summer comes and you want to sit and have that cup of coffee or that glass of wine and listen to the birds, they're going to be there ready for you. Now, for those of you who know me, or those of you who've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I am a big fan when it comes to water features. Water is one of my favourite topics when it comes to the garden. And not only can water create a great habitat for a lot of wildlife and nature within the garden, but it also gives that life-sustaining drink that bees, bugs, whatever are going to need throughout the year.
Now there's obviously your stereotypical pond that can work well, but it doesn't have to be that big, and a really small pool can be plenty. If you do have a room for a pond though, it can be a really stunning feature. Moving water can provide sound which could distract from road noise, and a little bit can go a long way. Now it is important, if you do have a pond, to give the wildlife a way in and way out, so a shelf which could be planted or simply have loads of rocks on it is important. There's nothing worse than coming out to a hedgehog floating upside down because it went in for a drink and couldn't get out. Again, as I say, a small pool of water can be plenty. It could have planting around it as well, like these 3 Corten steel bowls I added to a garden here in Nottingham. Or there might be some running water too that again creates visual interest and a bit of sound to the space. Another way is to have a rock or some sort of feature on top of a reservoir. Again, it's just a bit of running water that can create humidity, give wildlife a drink, and again bring some sound and lighting interest sometimes. This feature was quite simply a big block of York stone with a hole cored out in the middle for a pump with a reservoir underneath it. Not only did it give a great bird bath and a place for wildlife to get an easy drink, but also the visual effect was really mesmerising in the sunshine.
And you know, you've got even if you've got a really small space and you want to keep it really simple, just even a source of water can be life-sustaining and life-salvaging for that desperately thirsty bee that's been working hard on that hot summer day, topped up with just an inch of water. Or even at night, to give that hedgehog or fox a drink is a great way that you can do your bit and help out with nature and keep it coming back to your garden for more. So there we have it, simple as that. It's about creating a home and habitat for wildlife. It's about feeding them, you know, or creating a space that's going to allow them to feed themselves. It's about water, sustaining them throughout the year. It's not necessarily about rewilding your garden. You know, you don't have to let the garden go to rack and ruin, as you see with some places. It's really been encouraged recently. It's just about doing that little bit, and it doesn't have to spoil the way your garden looks or the way it feels. You know, you can still have that beautiful terrace, that glass of wine, that barbecue with family, but by adding these little tiny bits and pieces throughout the garden, whether it be trees, pollinating flowers, water, you know, a bit of an extra hedging rather than the fence, that can just do that little bit to bring nature back to your green space. And these simple additions don't necessarily need to break the bank either. They can be done on a real tight budget. And there we go, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it useful. If you have, don't forget to give us a like, and if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button. I really hope you can get out in your garden this next week and enjoy it. It's very sunny here in Nottingham today on Saturday. Not sure it's going to be like that for very long as we head into the darker evenings, but hey, during the weekends, if you can during the week, get out, enjoy the garden, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.